Buenas tardes, gente. Un poquito más tarde hoy. Hicimos un poquito de ejercicio afuera, pero está calientito. So que nada. Vamos a hacer este video muy bueno. Dice How Muscle Helps Your Life Longer. Es un video larguito, pero nada, yo voy a estar aquí haciendo ejercicio pues porque sí, porque para mí me entretiene. Y mientras estoy viendo este video, dice 6 health experts reveal the number one key to aging well: burning fat and building muscle over 40. Ya pasamos los 40, pasamos los 45 y estamos casi por pasar los 46. Vamos para 47 ahora en septiembre. Y todas estas cositas, ¿verdad? Mantener el cuerpo ágil, con buen tono muscular, comer saludable, dormir bien, suplementarse, hacer ejercicio obviamente. Todas estas cositas son los que apoyan el sistema, el cuerpo, y mantienen unas destrezas, unas habilidades que muchas veces son asociadas con juventud. Pero como dicen aquí, if you don't use it, you lose it. Si no lo usas, se va esa destreza y ya tú sabes, se va. Tremenda explicación que da el caballero. Creo que son diferentes personas. Vamos a escucharlo mientras hacemos ejercicio. Esto es un follow along si usted quiere. Yo tengo pesitas, usted puede usar las pesas si usted quiere. Si tiene pesas, si no, pues no hay problema. Esta parte es un poquito más difícil porque tengo este pull-up bar. Si usted no tiene, pues no se preocupe, puede hacer el remo. Y si no, pues puede hacer jumping jacks, caminar, mientras escucha esta información de extremo valor. Vamos a escucharlo. El podcast dice The Model Health Show. Mark Sison es el que está hablando ahora mismo.
I know old people who are skinny and they've lived a long time and they don't appear to have much muscle mass. Well, muscle mass, that part of the equation.
Sean Stevenson, el podcast de Sean Stevenson. Vamos a escucharlo.
Combined with strength and power, is what causes the rest of the organs in the body to have a reason to keep up with the muscles. So it's a little bizarre, but the brain says, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to lift weights, and I'm going to do curls, or I'm going to do squats, and then the signal goes to the body to build these muscles up, to get stronger, to keep up with the amount of work that the brain is choosing to do. But in the process, the body is trying to figure out how best to utilize all of the organs to achieve this goal. So when you say, I'm going to lift a heavy leg day, the heart goes, I guess I got to beat faster to keep up with the demands that this clown is putting on me right now in the gym. So the heart has to beat stronger. Or if you say, I'm going to go for a hike or whatever, the heart has to beat stronger. If you are doing intervals, if you're doing high-intensity intervals, the lungs have to breathe deeply. And so they have to inspire, and they'd have to take in oxygen to provide that oxygen to help fuel the muscles to do the work that you're choosing to do. The liver has to process fuel more efficiently. And so by choosing to do the work, and by choosing to use muscle mass and muscle strength as sort of the focal point, everything else comes into play here, and you get this complete individual that is now not just strong and able to move around the world and do the things that people who are older want to do, travel the world and have access to memories, but is also in a situation where you get up in the middle of the night to take a leak and you trip. And if you're strong, you trip and you laugh it off and you walk over and when you go back to sleep. But if you don't have the muscle mass, if you don't have the balance, if you haven't worked all these systems, the typical sad scenario is that the old person gets up in the middle of the night, trips, falls, breaks a hip. The hip breaks, by the way, because the bone is not strong enough. The bone density has been compromised because the person didn't do enough weight-bearing activity to cause the body to want to build stronger bones. you got to dig that if you don't go to the gym and you don't do this work, the body goes, hey, don't need to build muscle, don't need the heart to beat that fast, don't need the lungs to breathe in that much, don't need the bones to be that strong. Why would I waste valuable resources building strong bones if we're not going to do anything with it? So now the person winds up with a broken hip in the hospital, and the sad trajectory is typically they get pneumonia in the hospital, and they can't cough well enough to get rid of the sputum, and then the heart can't beat enough to keep up with the demands of the infection because you've only been working at 10% of capacity for the last 15 years. And so you die of congestive heart failure, you die of pneumonia, and ultimately people die of basically organ failure. People don't die of old age. They die of whatever organ says, I'm out, whatever organ taps out first. So longevity is really this sort of game we play of how to maintain muscle mass, how to maintain aerobic capacity, how to maintain liver strength. We call it vital capacity of the different organs, and vital reserve. And
are you like the millions of Americans who have recently opened up their auto insurance bill only to ask the question, what the heck's going on here? Over the last...
And if you understand this basic concept, then it makes sense that you would go to the gym and do squats once a week and do pull-ups and do a little bit of sprinting. Sorry for the long-winded explanation.
Oh, this is fantastic.
Here.
I mean, because our culture is so focused just on the aesthetic part of it, and not really looking at the fact that we should have known this decades ago, and I think our ancestors did, that muscle is really an endocrine organ, and it's releasing all of this chemistry. And now we know things like myokines, for example, that when you mention somebody going in and falling ill with pneumonia, and we think about how our muscle even influences our immune system, and the coolest thing about it is that this is something that we can create.
Yes.
Like, we actually can make more of it, and we can maintain it and care for it, but it becomes even more, in a sense, important as we age.
Yes. Yeah, no, it becomes your number one job as you age. I would think anyone over the age of 45 would be well served to consider fitness and health job number one. And, you hear these stories about all these people who spent their prime years from 25 to 50 building a business and making a lot of money and sacrificing their health and sacrificing their relationships with their family. And I'm like, dude, life is about enjoyment in the moment. And the number of people who, you ask them if you could, people spend a lot of their lives making money and losing their health. And then they're like, I would give out all my money to have my health back. Well, that's not necessary. And so
eso lo veo yo, lamentablemente, todos los días. Y lo he visto por estos 26 años trabajando en el fitness. Gente con dinero, pero que mira, ni botándolo. Y me dicen, no puedo hacer nada. No puedo disfrutar todo este dinero. Tengo esto. Bueno, a nivel que muchas veces terminan dejando el gym o simplemente van a caminar porque todos los doctores le dicen cuidado con esto, cuidado con lo otro, solamente camina. Me dicen, yo voy a volver, y se le nota ese pesar de que independientemente tienen muchos recursos económicos, no se disfrutan la vida. Que buscar ese balance, hermano. Seguimos escuchando.
So you should really think of your health as job number one after the age of 45. And that means when somebody says, well, I can't get to the gym every day because I just don't have the time. I'm working too hard. No, job number one is to get to the gym or go outside and walk and make your business calls while you're walking, or do micro workouts throughout the day where you drop and do 50 air squats or 20 push-ups every once in a while, or do a plank for 2 minutes. All that stuff counts. But if you cast it all aside and say, I'll wait till later to do that, sometimes, I'm not going to say it's too late, because we see a lot of people turn around at age 50 and 55 and start to get healthy again. But the good news is, I know you know this, as a former athlete, you can coast on the years that you spent working out between the age of 20 and 45. You can coast. You have to do the work, but you can coast for the next several decades, right? So, but health has to be job number one.
So let's dive in deeper today and really talk about this connection with muscle and longevity.
Yeah, I can't wait. And
Ok. Segundo invitado en el podcast es Dr. Gabriel Leon. Gabriel Leon, ella es physician and best-selling author. Me río de mi pronunciación, pero anyway. Ella es, pero bien enfática con el ejercicio de fuerza, de hipertrofia y el consumo de proteína. Vamos a ver de qué va a hablar ahora mismo aquí.
really appreciate this conversation, because what we're hearing right now is that in terms of longevity, we should reduce our protein intake. And that seems to be the overarching narrative. And what is so surprising to me as a trained geriatrician, and for people that don't know what that is, that's specializing in individuals over the age of 65 and end of life. Part of my job is managing individuals in nursing homes. And part of my job as a fellow was looking at their brain health, running a brain clinic at WashU. That is no small task as a geriatric fellow. And one of the things that we always look at is strength, capacity, and activities of daily living. When we think about that, arguably we think about skeletal muscle. So right now the conversation is geared towards longevity, which, by the way, is not defined. When we talk about longevity, specifically as individuals talk about reducing dietary protein, are we talking about reducing longevity by 6 years? Are we talking about living 6 hours longer? There is no hard endpoint in this nebulous concept of longevity. When we think about survivability, you have to think about skeletal muscle. And skeletal muscle in an aging population is critical. It is the pinnacle. It's not the peripheral discussion. It's not, we should eat this. Maybe our carbohydrates are too high. It's none of that. Skeletal muscle is an endocrine organ. It is our body armor. You have to protect it as you age.
Okay, you just said something that really jumped out at me. You said body armor.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I've been thinking about this from an evolutionary perspective. Like, why would we have the capacity to build and put muscle on our frame?
Muscle is the amino acid reservoir. Every time you are not eating, your tissues, your brain, your liver, your kidneys, all require amino acids, a steady state of amino acids in a fasted state. The place you're going to get that, skeletal muscle. The body is constantly going over a process of turnover. It's not, you don't stimulate muscle and that tissue stops being active. This is a constant process. Skeletal muscle is really what is going to maintain you in times of fasting. It's going to maintain you in times of injury, illness. We know cancer. We know that survivability of cancer is increased with the amount of skeletal muscle you have. I mean, these are really big factors, and we're totally avoiding the fact that skeletal muscle is the primary organ system of protection.
If you're a man who makes at least 150 grand a year and you're still embarrassed to take your shirt off at the pool, I will get you shredded like it got.
So this is looking at what's happening internally. What about externally?
Yeah.
Like if I think about it, when there was a time, I'm conjuring up images of swords and shields and these kind of things. And so when you said body armor, that really jumped out as like literally kind of like a protective mechanism.
Yeah.
Like, why am I able to grow these pecs to maybe protect my heart or something like that?
Well, I think that the concept of skeletal muscle is really all-encompassing. We can never say, I mean, listen, take out the bodybuilding community, which perhaps is a bit at that cusp end of intensity in terms of skeletal muscle, but the body was designed for movement. And right now we have an opportunity to not move, but we're a human machine. The human machine was designed for hard physical labor. Does that protect us? It definitely protects us in a multitude of ways: balance, strength, flexibility, survivability. If you go back to the times of swords, I'm sure the guy that had the most well-conditioned muscle was the individual that was going to survive.
Yeramel, saludo. Will, saludo. Aquí estoy escuchando información brutal. Para gente como nosotros, pasado los 40. Yeramel, yo no sé si tú pasaste los 40, pero yo sé que Will sí. Moverse es vida y hay que hacer ejercicio, que darle. Seguimos.
I mean, I, of course, it's just my perspective. I wasn't around during that time, but when we think about survivability, skeletal muscle, while not easy to put on, requires time and attention and dietary changes, right? You can't eat the way you did in your youth when you are primed for anabolic growth. That does transition, which we will definitely talk about. And that goes to the point of why protein restriction is so dangerous for an aging population. Because as we age, as we think about protecting our body armor, that amino acid reservoir, and there's so many things that we're going to talk about as it relates to skeletal muscle. Number one, the fact that it allows us to aid in protein turnover, which is ongoing. But also skeletal muscle, there's so many things. Skeletal muscle is one of the primary sites of insulin resistance. And we cannot go one day without hearing about insulin resistance.
Yeah, it's epidemic, absolute epidemic.
And we think about it as it relates to obesity. But insulin resistance, there is evidence that insulin resistance begins in healthy 20-year-olds that are sedentary. A decade before we're seeing changes in liver abnormalities, a decade before we're seeing changes in triglyceride levels, blood glucose, insulin. Insulin resistance of skeletal muscle is one of the primary defects of, I don't want to say all, but nearly all the diseases that we're seeing. Heart disease, cancer, obesity. Skeletal muscle needs to be our focus, as opposed to looking at the periphery, which is adiposity.
This brings us back to, you mentioned cancer earlier and being a protective mechanism there. So I was just wondering in my mind, like, what are all the pieces that could make that possible? I'm sure that, of course, insulin is going to be one of those factors.
Well, obesity is a known risk factor for cancer.
Right.
And cancer is very broad. Cancer is a disease of the genome. There are multiple different kinds of cancer. But the things that we can do something about really relate to getting our body composition in check. Not only that, not just that skeletal muscle is going to protect you with cancer cachexia, which is, cancer can be a very highly catabolic state. And we've seen, individuals who are going through chemo or who have cancer, in a clinic, when someone has rapid weight loss, one of the things that you think is cancer. It is a highly catabolic state. It destroys skeletal muscle, and an individual's survivability is going to be better if they have healthier skeletal muscle. I also want to mention something else. Not just that skeletal muscle is protective from the mechanical aspect, from the amino acid reservoir, but exercise. Exercise is, I don't want to say, broadly anti-cancer, but it definitely can interface with the immune system, and it can definitely help protect against certain kinds of cancers. Exercising skeletal muscle increases natural killer cells. It increases an interface with the immune system and with the inflammation in the body. It counterbalances inflammatory mechanisms in the body.
It's so powerful, and it's so simple.
It's so simple. And you know what we really need to do is how do we bridge the gap between fitness professionals and medical professionals? Right now, when we think about skeletal muscle, oftentimes we think about physical fitness. Physical fitness is incredibly important. And the way I think that we think about it is a bit simplified because we really need to bring it into an interface of medicine. Movement is medicine. Muscle is medicine. Do we have an obesity crisis? Yes. But what we really have is a muscle crisis. So with the longevity conversation, the idea of, number one, reducing diet. So I want to just put that out there. Number one, the idea of reducing dietary protein to protect against longevity is essentially saying muscle doesn't matter. But we know that skeletal muscle improves all survivability. And by the way, anyone who has ever worked in a nursing home will tell you how important muscle is. I was reading this morning, I was rereading one of my favorite papers, and with a female who perhaps isn't the healthiest, falls and breaks a hip, she has a 50% chance of never walking again.
Imagine being able to build anything, for any reason, in any style, at any...
I mean,
That's nuts.
that is insane. Do you understand that trickle-down impact that's going to have on her family, on herself, on her well-being, everything? So again, when we are talking about longevity and mTOR, we must phrase it in real-life application. Skeletal muscle, nobody can argue, requires dietary protein. This is a non-arguable fact. Whether you get your dietary protein from plants versus animals, one is obviously easier, the other is more difficult. Can it be done? It can absolutely be done. I will set the stage to tell you that the RDA, which we have known has not changed over the last 40 years as it relates to protein, is 50% too low to maintain health and wellness. So the RDA, and I'm setting this up for a very specific reason, the RDA is set at 0.8 grams per kilogram based on nitrogen studies of 18-year-old men that was extrapolated from animal data, that we know that in the literature, there is not one study that doesn't show improvement in endpoints, whether it's body composition or biomarkers, of nearly double that. Higher protein always does better than baseline RDA. Okay? Mm-hmm. We have not changed that recommendation in the last 40 years. Crazy. You mean to tell me that there has been no increase in knowledge of dietary protein in the last 30 to 40 years? That's not true. So we have to ask, why is that not being addressed? So the literature clearly supports double the RDA for overall survivability, especially as it relates to an aging population. We are talking about survivability, longevity, activities of daily living, body composition, protection against insulin resistance. How are you going to do that on a low protein diet if you do not have optimal muscle mass?
Well, we want to be protective of lean body mass, muscle specifically.
All right. Aquí estamos con Alan Aragón. Conmigo, porque Alan Aragón, un nombre que podría parecer latino, pero bueno, no sé dónde es, pero anyway, tiene un look bastante diferente el nombre, pero anyway. Lo mismo que me pasa a mí, yo soy Ludwig Henderson y soy boricua. Pero anyway. Alan Aragón, research scientist, best-selling author. También, wow.
Because you can look at muscle as the metabolic engine of the body. So the metabolic blast furnace of the body, where all the fuels are used and partitioned and directed to where they need to go. And if we lose muscle tissue, then you can reduce your resting metabolic rate, you can get reduced functional capacity, and a reduced capability to metabolize incoming fuels from the diet. And so the importance of muscle and maintaining muscle mass, it just can't be overstated.
Now, there's another and there is truth to this, but there's a huge caveat. We get blasted with a lot of information around muscle loss, right? As just degeneration as we get into older age brackets. Yeah. But there's a huge missing piece, because yes, obviously that's an aspect of this conversation. But the missing piece is it doesn't have to happen that way that you think it happens, because there's a lot of things that can be done to even build muscle later in life.
Yeah.
So can you talk about this whole paradigm? Should we be afraid of we're just going to lose our muscle? It's the end of the story. There's nothing we can do about it. Or is there something that we can do even in our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s to actually support our muscle mass?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so at the general population level, 40 is kind of a treacherous turning point for the average person, sedentary person out there in the world who isn't really conscious about health and fitness and training. The average person in the general pop loses about 0.5% a year of their lean body mass starting from the age 40. And at age 50, that can double. And that can double yet again at 60 and up. And so it's this acceleration of lean body mass loss as people get older. And there's always this looming threat of sarcopenia when people reach their advanced ages, like 60 and up. Sarcopenia really starts becoming a threat. The good news about that is that it's all preventable. I mean, we all have to die at some point, and we all kind of slow down at some point, and we all lose the motivation to maintain the same degree of muscle mass as we have right now, in our prime.
Yes.
So, but the fact of the matter is there's research showing.
Hey, Robert Hutchinson from Shark Tank. I'm a huge fan. Hey, what is your number one tip for saving money? Easy. Pay off your credit.
That people in their mid-80s can grow muscle if somebody's deconditioned for a number of decades and they're in their mid-80s. All you need to do is just start them on a progressive resistance training program. And their muscle reacts just like a young person's muscle would when you start them training at college. Now, some people are a little bit more banged up by the time they're in older age. Some people have some metabolic issues, some orthopedic issues that you would have to kind of tiptoe around when you're building that resistance training program. But nevertheless, it's literally never too late to wake muscle back up with training, get it stronger, cause muscle hypertrophy or gains in muscular size and function. There's no age at which it's too late to do that, even in people's 80s, 90s.
If you look at brain function and longevity, it's very clear that the body is informing the brain about the status of your...
Andrew Huberman, professor and neuroscientist. Es el que está hablando ahora.
Entire being, okay? And I truly mean that in the non-mystical sense. When we do load-bearing exercise of any kind, could even be air squats for some people, but if they're doing any kind of resistance training with weights or machines or body weight, there are actually hormones that are secreted from our bones. This is wild. There's things called, like osteonectin is an example of one, that are secreted that go to the brain that enhance the survival and the function of neurons, of nerve cells in the brain. And at first, when I heard this, I thought, this is crazy. The bones are making hormones, but it makes perfect sense. The skeleton is a very important system in our body. How do the areas of the brain that control movement, how do the areas of the brain that control learning, how do they know whether or not you are still moving or not? Well, they could know because your heart is beating, but maybe your heart's beating really fast because you're stressed out about something. The only way that your brain knows that your body is being used and that your brain needs to continue to adapt and to stay strong is if you're increasing the load on your skeleton. And if you look at cognitive decline and loss of memory and things over time, and you look at bodily function and the loss of certain functions, what you find is that there are these weird things that are correlated with brain longevity. And some of them include, for instance, the ability to jump and land. Right. I was talking to my mother's in her. Oh, sorry, Mom. She's in her mid 70s now, and we were talking about this because she said, I want to stay healthy. I want to keep my brain healthy. And I said, well, can you jump up and land? And she said, what are you talking about? That's crazy. And I said, can you jump up and land? I didn't want her to hurt herself. And we were talking about this. A lot of people, as they age, get injuries, hip injuries that take them out of commission. The ability to jump, not huge distances, right? But just to jump and land and be stable doing that. Obviously, you don't want people harming themselves. That's correlated with brain longevity and body longevity. What is it? Well, it's not just about shuffling around. It's because the bones are taking that impact. So when we weight train, we provide load forces onto the bones. The bones send signals to the nervous system and to the brain, and so there's brain longevity. So that's it's a roundabout but very mechanistic way of answering your question, that indeed when our body is strengthened, our brain gets better at the neuronal health level. Now, in terms of resilience, which I think, and our capacity to deal with stress, this is an interesting one. I think there are several places where exercise carries over to an enhanced ability to deal with stress. First of all is all the indirect stuff, like it improves our sleep, it reduces inflammation in the body, provided that exercise isn't too intense or too frequent. So there's all the indirect ways that it supports us and makes us more capable. But then there are the pain points of exercise, and those come in different forms. One of the less discussed pain points of exercise is the one where you don't want to exercise and you do it anyway. That's making yourself mentally stronger. And here I'm sort of paraphrasing in a much less entertaining way than the great David Goggins, right? Not his whole thing, he's about many things, but a lot of what David's about is about taking yourself from way back on your heels, don't want to get out of bed, don't want to do something, and getting into that forward center of mass. That is a very valuable brain function, to be able to take yourself from a place of, I don't want to do it at all, it's the last thing I want to do, and I'm going to lean into this. That carries over. And then the other one is the pain that you experience, healthy pain, during the exercise itself. The burning of your lungs, the burning of the lactic acid buildup, the straining under a rep or something like that. And there your cognitive or your thoughts about what you're doing. I'm here because I chose to be. I might not want to be, but I chose to be. Those are two different things, right? I chose to be here. No one's forcing me to do this. I don't have a gun to my head. I'm doing this, and this is going to benefit me. Over time, that will change your relationship to effort. And the holy grail of life, I believe, is when effort feels good. And no one gets to be in that state all the time. But I think that when we push ourselves physically, we get multiple opportunities to learn to go from the I'm kind of, that's my voice in my own head, I don't want to, and then doing it anyway. And then you have to remember to reward yourself. And that reward should not be in the form of an external reward. This is very important. It's tempting to say, I'm going to reward myself with the meal. You can still enjoy all the things you enjoy, but the reward has to be one that you give yourself mentally. Because when you start to give yourself external rewards, you're teaching your brain that rewards only come from the outside. When you give yourself internal rewards, and you can even make this a 1-minute meditation practice at the end of a particularly hard cold shower, or you get out, you sit there and tell yourself, this is good for me, I chose to do this is benefiting me. Those messages actually, I know it sounds a little hokey, but those messages actually help reinforce the whole process that you just forced yourself through.
Everything really is about holding on to or building muscle mass.
Bueno, vamos a continuar luego con este de verdad no sé si hay gente mirando ahora mismo, pero esto está brutal. Este podcast yo lo voy a seguir escuchando. Sé que me quedé por la señora JJ Virgin. Esto está demasiado. Yo voy a hacer un videito más adelante. Faltan 30 minutos, no, menos. Pero esto está bien chévere. Faltan creo que 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Son 6 o que faltan. Este es 4, 5 y 6. 3 o 2. Anyway. Pues nada, gente. Nos vemos. Moverse es vida. Las 4 bases. Dormir bien. Comer bien. Hacer ejercicio y suplementarse. Yo voy a comer ahora. Ahora comienza básicamente mi ventana de estoy rompiendo el ayuno ahora. aparte de los par de suplementos que me tomé por la mañana con el agua, incrementar la ingesta, ¿verdad?, de agua, y a seguir implementando todo esto que estamos escuchando. Bien importante. Lo más que me gusta es que todas estas personas lucen como lo que predican, y eso es grande. O sea, imagínense, un mecánico sin carro, un dentista mellado, que usted llame a Better Hearing y le digan, hello, ¿cómo es? No te oigo. What? So que estas personas me gusta cuando estoy viendo lo que estoy observando, ¿verdad?, en su presentación, veo que su vehículo, ¿verdad?, su cuerpo, pues refleja el conocimiento que están expresando. Gente, nos vemos ahorita. Bye bye.